Missile and Verse, and I'm here today to review Escaping Exodus Symbiosis by Nicky Drayden. This is the sequel to Escaping Exodus, which I reviewed previously on my channel. I'm going to link that in the description box down below for those who are interested. I'm assuming if you've watched this review that you've already read Escaping Exodus, so I'm going to talk about plot points from the previous book. If you haven't read it yet, you probably don't want to watch this review. I received an advance reader's copy in exchange for a fair and honest review. Thank you to the publisher for that. So, as in Escaping Exodus, there are two narrators. Sesuke is coming back. Other narrator is Doka, her betrothed from the previous book. Adala isn't narrating anymore, and she isn't really around that much for this book. And this story is about Sesuke and Doka navigating this marriage and trying to figure out how to best govern the ship. And Sesuke and Doka are just having marriage issues in general. Sesuke and Adala have married at this point, so they have to bring in 6 other people to have their marriage and their family unit be seen as legitimate, which is very important because the way that they are governing to try and make life on the Paradiso One more equitable is very unconventional. They're facing a lot of backlash, and so they think it's very important to have this very conventional marriage. Sesuke is having weird dreams where she's seeing her banished sister Cassina. A nearby Zenzi ship has died, and residents of Paradiso One have accepted a lot of the migrants, so there's cultural clashes. And so there's just a lot of stuff going on. I really enjoyed the first book. I have commissioned fan art of some of the characters, and in particular, I really like Adala. If you've seen my previous review, you know Sesuke brings the drama, but she frustrates me as a character. And I think that people who enjoyed the previous book will find a lot of things to like about this book. We get to see a lot more of the world, which was great. We get to see new areas of the beast. We get to spend a lot of time in the lakes that are in the Zenzi's bile ducts. We get to spend some time in the brain, where the residents of the Paradiso One do ceremonies around giving birth. We spend some time in the mouth, where some of the kinkier residents of Paradiso One will go to be kinky and daring. So in the previous book, it was mentioned that there were, I think, 6 other Zenzi with people on them, and in this book, we get to see all the cultures from the other delegations, and that's very interesting. They all have very different cultures and manners of dress. Nicky Drayden is a very creative author, and I love the setting. I felt like that's a perfect canvas for her creativity. We get to spend a lot more time getting into the nitty-gritty of the marriage social structure. That was something that was kind of confusing in the first book because it's not center stage and it is very elaborate. And this time around, we really get into the heart mothers, the heart fathers, head fathers, all that good stuff. For fans of the previous book, some of the characters that are mentioned in passing will also appear here. There was a trans male character from a very long, prestigious political line who wanted to make a try for the Senate, and we meet him in this book, and we get to see more of his and Doka's relationship. The body horror is still great. It's very detailed, very disgusting. A lot of the body horror in this book is around what it means to be banished inside the beast. When I first heard that they were banishing people, I was like, where are you banishing them to? The beast feels so small and cramped. Where are you possibly throwing these people? And you just don't see them. And we get to see the details of that, and that's pretty disgusting. There's also body horror in here around pregnancy and abortion. So I'd keep in mind that if you are touchy about topics of abortion or birth complications, this probably isn't the book for you because it does get kind of gory in that respect. Nicky Drayden is also a very funny author, and this book was still very funny to me. There's some humorous little interactions when Doka has to go meet with the people on the other Zenzi in terms of those little culture clashes and just how Doka thinks that his people rank up in comparison to everyone else. There's a sex scene that I was cackling at. Basically, it's narrated from the perspective of this one character who just thinks that they're killing it. They think that they are just doing something. And I was reading it and I was like, this is kind of I'm not feeling this. And then we hear the perspective of the other character, and they're like, oh no, yeah, it was terrible. And it was really funny the ways in which, the way that the one character thought they were doing a really great job, the other character was like, the other character thought they were really botching it. And I think that Drayden does a good job of like subtly reminding the reader that they're in a foreign setting by how she repurposes common words. On the Paradisa one, lime tarts involve insect eggs and cheese has to be dethorned. In that way, I think Drayden does a good job of like not having to like reinvent a language or do a lot of explaining. She kind of takes something familiar and leaves a lot to the reader's imagination. She also does that in terms of changing the connotations of how bodies are described and reflecting how this society's beauty standards are very different from our own. Those were all the things that I really liked about the book. In terms of things that didn't really work for me, like I said, I got the fan art of Adala. I really do love Adala. And I felt like she was kind of shortchanged. Like, I kind of felt like Drayden flattened some things with Adala and Cassina's characters in the first book. I was hoping to see them get a little more complexity. And I felt like Drayden has kind of continued with the course she had set for the characters in the previous book. And I kind of made my peace with that. But I also had an issue with how the minor characters are treated. I feel like Drayden doesn't really have an issue with like a large ensemble cast. Like I read her book Prey of Gods, which has 4 or 5 narrating characters, and every character felt complete. They felt like they had different goals and aims, and sometimes those intersected and they could work together, and sometimes they were at odds and they were just gonna have to duke it out. And I don't know what it is, but in this series, I feel like there's kind of this trend of minor characters who ultimately they have to act in some way that furthers the plot, but that doesn't necessarily like fit in with their goals. I felt like that happened with Laze, and I don't know if that's really changed in this book. Sesuke is dealing with a lot of trauma, understandably, from the first book, and Adala is too. And this novel does give Adala some room to kind of like work through her issues with Sesuke. And this novel does like look at how Sesuke deals with trauma are very different from how Adala deals with her traumas. And I don't know if the novel really took into account how deep Adala's traumas would go. In the beginning of this book, like Sesuke does not feel at peace ever, and we really get a sense for what she's going through. And Adala, she's not a narrating character, so we don't see a lot of it. But at the end of the last book, like Adala was a wreck. Like Adala was hallucinating, she was abusing drugs, and that was just from the death of her sister. And at the end of the last book, not only is her sister dead, but her comrade, her girlfriend, has also died, has sacrificed herself. And it felt like only very small parts of Adala's trauma was recognized. There isn't a whole lot of talk about how is she dealing with the loss of her sister? How is she dealing with the loss of Laze? Like, Laze's death is like so fresh. How is that affecting her and her relationship with Sesuke? Not a lot of talk of that. In this story, there's a minor character, Baradonna, who is the matron. She is an accountancy guard who served with weight, and she's helping Doka. She's a bodyguard, and I felt like she kind of got a similar role as Laze did in that to like further the plot. Baradonna had to like discard herself in certain ways that didn't really make sense to me in terms of who she was as a character. In discussing the last book with the book club, other people are talking about like the specific like violences that are done to like women who are more masculine. I haven't like done a lot of reading about that or thought about that a lot in terms of like representation. Baradonna isn't really described as masculine. Like she's very large from what I remember, but she's also like very feminine. So I don't really see that as continuing a trend, but it was something I felt like I should point out that it's not something I'm very knowledgeable on. And in terms of like the minor characters feeling like plot tools, I feel like it got very crunched because of the marriage. I felt like we didn't really get to meet or understand all of them. Like there's one in particular, Chiral, and her and Doka are like a main coupling. And she has like certain relationships with Sesuke that I didn't really understand, like outside of the need to move the plot in a certain direction. And, you know, another one of Doka's spouses, Calum, the trans man who wants to be a senator, also has like a certain view of Sesuke that I thought was interesting and I wish had been fleshed out more. I want to really see more of the character dynamics between everyone in that marriage. And like there is a lot of drama there in that Doka wants to be with Sesuke, but Sesuke doesn't really like Doka. and like the way they've rearranged their marriage so that Doka can lead, Doka and Sasuke can't be together. I felt like I didn't get a sense for some of the characters' personalities or like how they interacted with everyone else in the marriage, and so that felt a little flat. And it felt like another issue with the previous book was the pacing. Like it felt like things really shot off at the end and it felt very busy, and I felt like that continued here. I felt like it was another thing where like things were getting shortchanged. I don't know if there's going to be a sequel to this one in a similar way that I didn't know if there's going to be a sequel to the Escaping Exodus. So like I don't know if some of these things are going to be fleshed out, but in particular, I felt like the migrant plot line really got shortchanged. Like it felt like they just kind of showed up and like I didn't really get a good grip on what their culture was like. I didn't really feel like as immersed in them as I did in the world of the people in Paradiso 1. And like I wanted to see more of the plot line in terms of like how are they going to try and incorporate this group of migrants? How is that going to change both of those cultural groups? What are the things that are going to be adopted and what are the things that are going to get left behind? And that could have been like the entire focus of the book, honestly. And as it was, it felt like it got very little time. So in terms of like the narrating characters, I think that like Sasuke is still bringing the drama as always. I think that she has like matured and changed in some ways, and like it's interesting to watch her struggle as she's trying to figure out where she fits in on the ship. And it's interesting to watch Doka where he feels like he has all this stuff he has to live up to. He has to show that he can govern at like the first male ruler that the Paradiso 1 has had in centuries. He feels like he has to live up to like the legacy of Adala as a lover in terms of him trying to woo Sasuke. And I just kind of made my peace with the fact that like people seem to think that Sasuke is a great ruler, which I still don't really understand. And in some ways it feels like Sasuke doesn't want certain things and she causes a lot of grief avoiding certain things just to decide she's going to do the thing that she was originally avoiding, with like very minor tweaks. And in the first book, there's a lot of questions around environmental sustainability. And that question is kind of picked up here and it has like a grim solution. The ending gave me Octavia Butler in some ways. It gave me Rosewater by Tade Thompson in some ways. And I think that if Drayden wanted to write more books in this universe, she like absolutely could. So on the whole, I enjoyed it. And I think that if you really like the first one, then you're definitely going to find things that you're going to like in this one. I'm a little disappointed that if you're a reader who wasn't really feeling the first one, that there isn't like more to encourage them to stick it out. But everything isn't for everybody. So that was my review. Thanks for watching. This is going to be out on February 23rd. Do you think you're going to be giving it a read? Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Goodbye.